Hello and welcome to the Down to the Wire podcast. Today we are doing something a bit different. We are doing a Tour de France special ahead of the race which starts on the 26th of June. As a break from tradition, the other Jack is not here, but instead we are joined by Aaron Wynn, who is a friend of ours and a host of the Breaking Borders podcast. Aaron, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm really good, thank you. Really excited for the Tour de France this year. And just looking forward to getting stuck into it and having a good chat about it.
Cool. You are somewhat of a avid cyclist or triathlon shall we say. So I'm hoping you can bring something from that side of it for sure to this conversation.
So, I mean, cyclists and triathletes are often referred to as somewhat of rivals or enemies in that sense. But, I love cycling and I love triathlon. So, yeah, a bit of both.
Cool. I wasn't aware of that, so learning something new already. Let's jump in straight away with the teams, shall we say, and starting with the team which arguably you could say going into the last tour was probably the biggest team, Team Ineos, but was surprisingly underwhelming in terms of their performance, with Bernal, I think, exiting the tour about the midway through the entire competition. So yeah, they went into the race last year with Bernal as their sort of sole contender, but this year they haven't even brought Bernal with them. Instead, they've opted for quite an aggressive team with Geraint Thomas, Richard Carapaz, Tao Gegenhardt, and Richie Porte for that instance. Quite a lot of the big players. Do you think it's going to help them in a sense entering a race with more than one hope this year to actually win it, rather than putting all of their eggs in the one basket?
Yeah, well, I think you saw that in 2020 when they went with in 2019 when they went with Geraint Thomas and Egan Bernal. Obviously, at the beginning, everyone thought that G was going to get his sort of second tour and things like that, and then Bernal sort of came strong at the end and he took over, and G ended up being his domestique, and I think that technique has obviously worked better for them when they banked it all with Bernal last year, and he just never really looked right. He had a back injury, didn't he, and which has been niggling him, and I think that was sort of the main cause of his exit. But yeah, I think it's crazy the fact that you've got like 3 Grand Tour winners in the same team, and you got Richie Porte in there as well as a new addition, and like you couldn't really ask for much of a better domestique if he's not going for the GC himself. So yeah, I think they've got a great chance of winning this year. I think there's very little excuse if they don't get at least 2 on the podium, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you mentioned they've got 3 Grand Tour winners in their team. It's the first time a team's gone to a Grand Tour, to the Tour de France with 3 Grand Tour winners in one team. I think since 1969, actually.
Oh, really?
So yeah, it should be a turn up for the books in a sense of that is probably the most stacked team. And they also, in terms of their preparation for the Tour, they've won the Dauphiné, they've won Tour de Suisse. That's the first time that's happened for one team since 2005. They've also won the Romandie, Giro, Dauphiné, the Tour de Suisse, as we just saying then. That's the first time that's ever happened since the record was checked in a sense, but sort of going back in a sense, in all of those races which they have been winning, neither Roglic or Pogačar were actually at any of those races. Just for reference, Ineos haven't won a stage that Roglic has been competing in since they were Team Sky, and they've never won a race which Pogačar was competing in. That's a full stage rather than just individual stages. So do you think, in a sense, any of their individual cyclists could go head-to-head with Roglic or Pogačar, or do you think it is purely going to be on the basis of having the strongest team that they're going to have to try and dismantle their sort of grip on all big tour races at the moment?
Yeah, so I think, like you say, head-to-head, you don't, if you have Pogačar in that Ineos team, 100% he's going to be the top cyclist because he's got the best team and he is the best individual. There's no doubt about it. If everyone's on their peak performance, Pogačar is winning out of the peloton as it stands. That is just a fact at the moment. He's the best all-rounder, best climber. Yeah, he's just crazy. But the fact that there's such a strong team with that Ineos and they can share the workload. Geraint Thomas could, because they'll know who's sort of the forerunner at the moment. Although they'll say, we're going to see what the form is like and things like that. I'm pretty sure they'll have it penciled in who's going to be the one who's going to be going for it initially anyway. And if they can keep that one person fresh in comparison to, Pogacar's got to do a lot of work on his own, who might really only have one or two people in his team who can keep the pace at the front of the peloton, then I think, like I say, I think Ineos shouldn't have an issue finishing quite high this year. I'd love to see G in yellow again, but it could be a long shot.
That's fair enough. That's fair enough. Sort of, well, not jumping ahead too far, but bringing up that conversation you just say about Pogacar perhaps not having very many teammates to help him. Jumbo-Visma not got Tom Dumoulin this year, and Roglic seems to definitely have pushed Kruijswijk out of the way in terms of competing with him for the sort of lead role in that team. But yeah, going on about Pogacar and the fact that he managed to win last year with basically nobody helping him, and he was just with the team Jumbo-Visma pretty much for the entirety of the tour. He's basically another one of their riders by the end of it, how frequently he was with them. Do you think the sort of days of controlling the peloton in that way with sort of multiple riders on one team, just controlling the pace and almost keeping it really, really high tempo but not ever really attacking, do you think those sorts of days are over? Particularly with, you saw how Ineos sort of, once they abandoned with Bernal, they sort of just went for it in sense of just trying to win stages. Do you think sort of the tour is going to be one in that aspect in a sense this year, on the sort of stage wins and big attacks rather than just controlling the pace?
I think it's going to be a really interesting tour in that sense, because I don't think anyone really knows how it's going to work yet, because there's no way that Ineos and Jumbo-Visma can allow Pogacar to do what he did last year. Like, there's no way they can let him just float between all the wheels and not do any work and then, just pull out of the bag. But it's, how do you even combat that? Because he's so good. It's like you can't just like not let him come with you. So it's going to be a really interesting one to see how it pans out, because, Ineos and Jumbo-Visma have got the engines to be able to just power the race. And, we saw Jumbo-Visma do that last year, didn't they? That's all they did. They powered the front. That was all it was. Roglic was the number one man, and then it was obviously stolen from him at the end in arguably one of the greatest last day showdowns that has been in a long time in the Tour de France. But yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to see the dynamic this year. I mean, imagine if the teams were like, go on Team UAE, see what you can do. You do a bit of work this year, seeing as you didn't do much last year. But yeah, I mean, what do you reckon? What do you think it's going to look like?
It's going to be a tricky one, because Pogacar only really looked bad on one stage last year. Oh, I don't even think you could say bad, but he got caught out only on one stage, and that was when the crosswinds came in quite early on in the race, and I think he lost up to about 45 seconds on that lead group, which he wasn't a part of at that stage. So I don't know. Yeah, I understand what you're saying about they're perhaps going to, in a sense, not be as kind to him and not let him just come along for the ride and guide him all the way up these Alps, in a sense, and perhaps they will be more attacking as a result of that. But it is going to be tricky for Pogacar if he doesn't have any support up in those mountains. But yeah, I do think it's going to be a case of just exploiting whenever an opponent makes a mistake, in a sense. I mean, we saw at the Giro with Team Ineos, well, actually all the teams, once Remco Evenepoel sort of fell off a bit, particularly on the gravel stages. They really put the burners on, everyone up the tempo. It was pretty much a cohesive unit of all of the teams at the front going, let's really put him in the dirt here because we don't want him. You know what I mean? I think that's going to happen this year in the Tour. I think somebody makes a mistake on one stage, everyone's clumped together to say, let's kill them off now. Let's not even let them. It's basically going to be, you need those people to protect you, and Remco Evenepoel didn't have those guys. He only had one guy with him pretty much all in the mountains in the Giro, and it showed. So yeah, as much as I probably think Pogacar probably will win it again this year, because he is, as you were saying, undoubtedly the best cyclist in the peloton, having that lack of protection I think is going to pay dividends, because I think it is going to come down to who makes the least mistakes in a way. Particularly with his age, that is.
I agree. Yeah.
Sort of moving on to Jumbo-Visma, we've sort of spoken about them briefly. But yeah, heartbreak last year with Roglic losing it on stage 20 on a time trial as well, which is something that he, is perhaps more known for than his climbing ability. So that was a big shock for the books, I think. But they did have a lot of signs of promise with guys like Wout van Aert winning 2 stages, and he sort of just burst onto the scene in terms he looked like he could win every sprint at one stage. But they don't have Tom Dumoulin, as we were saying. Do you think this is going to hinder their prospects in a sense of controlling the peloton? I mean, obviously we were speaking about sort of Jumbo-Visma last year had such an enormous arsenal of riders who were able just to stay at the front and be competitive, whilst Ineos did seem to just flag a little bit, and it was quite often
Yeah.
Bernal and maybe one other at the front. Do you think they're going to sort of not be able to, like, you know, when you see at the front of the peloton, you see like 5 or 6 from about 4 different teams all there, and they're sort of driving the pace, but with sort of a smaller, or maybe not smaller team, but less high-profile team going into the Tour, do you think this is going to hinder their chances to sort of control the race in a sense?
Well, I mean, I think you talk about Wout van Aert there. I mean, the amount of times that you just saw him on his own powering the whole peloton last year, and then still going on to win in the sprint at the end of the race, just proves how much of an absolute ridiculous, set of legs he's got on him. But you look at their team, and you don't really see much of a weakness on there. You've got Seb Kuster, who's a great domestique in the mountains. You have seen him a bit, being a bit weak in some of the recent races, but I almost feel like they, could be saving themselves for the Tour. You don't know, in that sense. And you got Steven Kruijswijk, who's, he won't be in the GC contention as long as Roglic is. So he's going to be an amazing domestique for Roglic. I don't think they can have an issue. I think they've got strength and depth there. They've got Tony Martin as well, who's often you see him on the front. I think he's still their road captain, isn't he? So,
yeah, I think he almost took the mantra of the leader of the peloton in the first stage.
Oh yeah, I remember.
But he was just sort of hands wide like an eagle, like let's slow this down, guys. This is dangerous.
Yeah, I remember seeing that. I just thinking, what is going on here? I just I hadn't actually seen that before, but yeah. It was funny, but yeah, I don't think they're gonna have an issue. I think it's gonna be very much the same as last year, as far as Jumbo-Visma. I think they'll just do what they've been building up to doing for so many years, and trying to take control of that peloton. But it's going to be difficult because, Ineos's team is a lot stronger this year than it was last year.
Properly stacked team, properly stacked. You mentioned Wout van Aert, and he is just a specimen in terms of how impressive he is on the bike. Him, Alaphilippe, Van der Poel, they've been having some absolute classic duels prior to the Tour de France this year. You've seen them in Milan-San Remo, Tour Flanders, Strade Bianchi, the World Championships, and obviously some of the stages of last year's Tour de France. We saw Alaphilippe and Wout van Aert go at it. Do you think Jumbo-Visma can afford to let Wout van Aert, in a sense, go off and duel with those two for stages? Because by and large, those three pretty much could win every hilly stage going if they really wanted to, because just how powerful they are. Do you think they'll can afford to let Wout van Aert go off like that again this year? Or do you think without Tom Dumoulin, they're going to need him to step in and be that super domestique that Roglic may need to actually win the whole thing?
Yeah, I think it's exactly that. I think they're going to need him because, I mean, if you look back at all the tours that Sky and Ineos have won, that they've just been there with one goal in mind, and that's to win the GC. And they often let their stronger time trialists do their thing in the TTs. But apart from that, it's all hands on deck. We're going to be working for our number one guy. And I think if Roglic is going to want to realistically, not bottle it this year, he's going to need all the time he can get going into that last time trial. And he's going to need every single person in his team working for him. It is a shame for Wout van Aert. I'd like to say they give him a few stages, but it's almost like if they want to win the GC, then they like I say, they're going to have to all pull together and fight for Roglic. Otherwise, because if he goes for a stage and then Roglic doesn't perform as well, it's like, oh, well done, Wout van Aert, for doing that, but we've lost out some seconds on the GC. It doesn't really sit right with me. He'd be focusing on those sort of like one day races or the shorter races, shorter tours and things. I think this year we'll see him just sticking. Well, Roglic just sticking to Van Aert's wheel, I think.
That's fair enough. Dave Brailsford sort of spoke about when they changed tactics last year to be more attacking and offensive once Bernal went out, that they sort of saw an improvement in how fans perceived their brand. So they've said this year they're going to react and be more attacking in a sense. Do you think they could even sort of match Wout van Aert up against somebody on Team Ineos and say, you know, in a sense,
Yeah.
keep Roglic with Thomas for the entire tour, and make sure that happens. But like when often you'll see, even sometimes in the sprints, you'll see almost like a fake. Okay, we're leading out for this person, and then let's say Richard Carapaz might go up the road, and then they go, well, if Thomas, if Team Ineos don't even bother chasing Carapaz going up there, that's all on Jumbo Visma. So maybe they use
Yeah.
Wout van Aert as a blocker to say, you're going to go man to man with Carapaz, for instance, just because we can't afford to let someone, somebody, because as we were saying, Team Ineos have so many people who could win the Tour, can't allow somebody from them just to go off and seem like a non-threatening rider when in actuality they could get 2-3 minutes on everybody else if the situation's right.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, isn't it? If G or Carapaz, and even Teo, if they go up the road, you're going to have teams twitching and being a bit nervous. It depends where they are in the race and what the standings are in GC. But you're not going to want to let them go because they are Tour winners or definitely in contention to win a Tour. So it's almost like they've got so many sort of like bluffs that they can pull to sort of almost confuse other teams and sort of throw their tactics in the air. As long as Ineos know what's going on, then I think then they'll be all right.
Yeah, Ineos are definitely going to have all of the cards to play at this tour. But I guess Jumbo Visma just got to they're holding the pocket aces, and then that'll be that.
I was surprised not to see Ghana in the team though. I thought he'd be getting in, but because they haven't really. I mean, they've got Geraint Thomas for the time trials, haven't they? But you normally expect them to put him in there just to boss all the TTs in the stages.
Well, I guess those don't really help the other members of the team. I get what you mean, and it's always nice to win the stages, but I guess after last year's sort of embarrassment, I'm not surprised to see them go, let's focus on one thing rather than go for multiple. But
that is true. I guess that speaks volumes then, really, doesn't it? The fact that they haven't included Ghana for the time trials. They're not really interested in stage wins. They'll take them, but it's not the sole focus.
Yeah, you're not going to beat Roglic on, you know what I mean? Well, you might beat Roglic on a time trial, but it doesn't actually help the team in a sense of getting
exactly.
But
yeah,
well, we can only hope. Moving on to sort of Team UAE, which is more rather Team Pogacar, because it's not very well stacked in a sense.
Yeah.
But their team last year, sort of the guys who were supposed to be helping Pogacar were like Fabian Aru, Davide Formolo, David De La Cruz, those sorts of the guys who were meant to help him out in the mountains. But De La Cruz, I think he fell on stage 1, so it meant that he was sort of a non-starter from there on because he was carrying a bit of an injury, and Aru was a bit of a non-starter as well. So it was kind of Pogacar against the world. But this year it's a little bit of a stronger squad, particularly as Pogacar now has Rafael Majka to help him and Mark Hirschi to an extent. He joined from Team Sunweb. Do you think the victory was sort of largely down to the fact that it was his first tour last year, and if the team sort of didn't race him hard, or do you think when he wasn't at the front of the race? Hang on, let me get that right. I was reading that as it doesn't actually make sense to my question. Yeah, what do you sort of make of that team then? Do you think it's going to be more able to support him in the mountains, or do you reckon it's going to be not enough in a sense still because just how stacked the other teams are?
Yeah, I mean, you look at the fact that he's now got Mark Hirschi. I think that's huge. He was such a strong rider last year, made such a big impact. He had that amazing stage win. I can't remember if he won 1 or 2 stages.
Two.
Yeah, 2 stage wins, yeah. And they were like pretty epic in the way that he did it. And if you've got that standard of rider now working for you, then it's only going to work in your favour. But I mean, I do think the big part of Pogacar's victory last year was the fact that everyone sort of had one eye on him, but they never truly expected him to do what he did. And I think that was sort of like part of his winning formula, if you will. Like sort of, no one truly expected him to be able to pull it out of the bag in the way that he did and just dance between the wheels. But it was, if you remember, it was always being commentated on. It was always sort of like, and it's Ineos and Jumbo Visma, and Pogacar's still there. It was literally just yellow, black, and one white jersey. So. I mean, like I said earlier, I don't think he's going to have that same freedom this year because they were punished for it last year. So, but I think the fact that he has Mark Hirschi now working for him, and as well he's got Majka as well. I think it's going to be a bit of a different race. I think if he's got 2 strong people in the mountains like that, Christoph's not going to do much for him, I don't think. He had the jersey for like a day, didn't he? Last was it like the first day?
Yeah,
yeah, the jersey,
day.
and he just like as soon like in like the middle of the stage, he was like waving goodbye to the jersey, literally to the cameras. It was either the second or third stage. You just knew that he just couldn't hold it. So I'm not sure he's going to do that much. But I think it's going to be pretty big. That he's got two domestiques there that will do a lot of help for him.
Well, to be fair, I mean, a lot of sort of cycling teams' revenue, a lot will come from sort of the stage victories and how they perform on these sort of Grand Tour stages. But a lot of it is just publicity in a sense. You don't think they're going to allow Mark Hirschi? I mean, he was the combative award winner last year, like as the overall ones. You don't think they're going to let him go off and get the UAE brand a bit more reputation or recognition, or you think he's primarily just there to help Pogacar?
Well, I mean, it's the same as the other teams, isn't it? I guess would they rather bank on the fact that the UAE brand will get built by Pogacar winning the whole race, or or whether they want to go for individual spectacular stages that are memorable and things, to sort of get that camera time throughout the tour.
I guess in a sense, even if Pogacar isn't there, if he flunks out like Bernal did last year, at least they know Hirschi could do it, and it's like all your eggs in one basket at least. That's
exactly.
Yeah. For sure. Going on that sort of combative sort of conversation, are there any riders in a sense you think could be the sort of breakout star again with a couple of big wins? I mean, we saw Padan of Bahrain Victorious win 2 stages of Dauphiné, which were quite impressive stages because he came out of nowhere. Is there anyone, in a sense, you had your eye on going into this? If not, no worries.
I mean, I think if Evenepoel was going, I mean, if we knew that I think he would be probably the one to. I'd love to see Wout van Aert be able to have free rein. I just think he's such a class rider, but I just think he's going to be reined in by the team. And it's not going to be something he's going to argue with. Ultimately he's going to want the team to win. But I think if GC goes out the window for Jumbo-Visma, I think you'll see Wout van Aert doing a lot of damage in that sort of sense. Again, if Julian Alaphilippe doesn't think he's got it in him for the GC, then I think we'll see him smashing out the stage wins. He comes from nowhere in those sort of stages, like he did in the World Champs. Yeah.
Fair enough. That's good. Sort of going on that sort of battle for yellow. We've spoken about Carapaz, a little bit of Tao Gegenhardt, and the fact that Ineos also have Richie Porte. Are there any other sort of names that you sort of had your eye on? Think do you have a chance, or do you think this is going to just be a shootout between someone from Ineos and then Roglic and Pogacar?
I mean, you still got Kruijswijk. I mean, he did come. Was it second when Thomas won it, or was it when Bernal won it?
Might have been. No, I'm sure he's come relatively high up previously.
Yes, I mean he definitely came second or third in 2019 when Bernal, him, and Thomas were on the podium. So I mean, people forget that because of Roglic. But I think if Kruijswijk's feeling good, then Roglic is going to have to bow out in that sense if he's outperforming him. But yeah, I can't really see. I mean, I did love it when Alaphilippe was doing so well. It was so great for the race when he was doing well in 2019.
Especially as a Frenchman.
Yeah, I mean, it was so good for the race. I mean, I can't see anyone apart from the big dogs this year. Really, I mean, you got Teo won the Giro last year. He's going to be all in for someone else within his team. He's 3 or 4 riders down the pecking order, really, isn't he? And as far as British riders go, I can't see Froome doing anything at all. Really,
no, he's not looked at all on the pace, has he, since his move to Israel Startup Nation?
No, I mean, and you can't blame him. You can't recover from an injury, that quick. It's that sort of level of injury as well. And, yeah.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah, well, we sort of mentioned about teams changing strategies. We only saw 5 breakaway wins last year, but in the sort of prelude to this year's tour, there's been a lot of stage wins. I mean, at the Dauphiné, there was a breakaway win, I think, on all bar 3 stages, but I think it was actually it was Lucas Postelberger took a breakaway stage win on stage 2 and then held the yellow jersey in that scenario for 5 of the 8 stage races. So
Yeah.
you can find a breakaway winner really does quite well. Do you think there will be very many breakaways this year? And particularly with the lack of the big teams, in a sense, sending somebody up the road because they're all going to be going for GC.
Yeah, I think you'll find a lot of the smaller teams will be going for the breakaways. You often find that, don't you? You see in the breakaway, you see like riders that you don't even sort of recognise in that sense the names of, and they from smaller teams just wanting to get the sort of the airtime out there. But yeah, I think this sort of the breakaway strategy is almost like I feel like sometimes it's just done because it's the done thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and it is just sometimes teams getting their brand out there in that sense. But yeah, I think it'll all depend on the conditions and things. You know, if you've got a lot of crosswinds and you've got some crazy conditions on some stages, I think that'll open up. The gaps will be there. Like we were saying earlier with Pogacar when he lost out all that time, that wasn't anything to do with his cycling ability. That was to do with the lack of organisation with his team and the tactics and things. So yeah, I mean, it's difficult to call it until you know sort of what the stage is going to be like, really. Because I mean, if it's a sprinter stage, the breakaways almost likely always going to get caught by the sprinter teams because they're going to plan to perfection. But yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting one to see unfold.
Hopefully so. Hopefully so. You sort of spoken on the sprinters then, in a sense, being prepared. Just good segue over to the battle for the green jersey, in a sense. Last year, Sam Bennett won it with 380 points and just the 2-stage wins. But previously, before that, Peter Sagan had won it the previous 2 years, and he'd won it 7 of the last 9. Do you think, well, some were saying that he was off his form last year because of some long COVID issues. Do you think that was the case, or do you think age is finally catching up to the great Peter Sagan?
I think it was. I think you've got to give him the benefit of the doubt last year. He's been so consistent, so strong over so many years. I mean, I'm backing him this year to get a green jersey. I just think, I think that he will show everyone that I think he's got a lot of sort of making up to do, isn't he? In that sense, if he said that he had long COVID and he said that he was recovering from that, then it's sort of like this year is like, okay, well, show us what you can do when you're fully fit now. So I think he'll have that sort of motivation behind his performance. And I think that's why I'm gonna go for him. What's your sort of prediction in that battle?
Well, typically, Peter Sagan, he's a very, very good sprinter, don't get me wrong, but his coy way in getting the green jersey is by winning the sprints on the uphill stages, in a sense, or the perhaps more hilly ones where the more natural sprinters can't quite compete with him. But with sort of Wout van Aert, Alaphilippe and Van der Poel, they're pretty ace at that sort of stuff. I mean, they're phenomenal at the one-day stage races, so sort of those hilly stages could be the ones where we see those guys shine. You don't think perhaps that sort of in a sense, because those guys will be stealing a lot of those points which Sagan perhaps had earmarked for him, in a sense, to get that green jersey, you don't think that's going to be more of a threat to him, in a sense, this year on his sort of comeback revenge tour?
Well, I just think that it's often Sagan's, his team is normally his team's goal to get the green jersey, isn't it? It's just what they do well, and I think that they'll be planning this tour around Peter Sagan getting that jersey, and I think, and that's why because you've almost got the team, they lead him out, they get him the points, ticks over, he got the green jersey for yet another day, and it just seems that the gap just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. I mean, Sam Bennett was obviously he was winning in those sort of those shootouts between the two of them last year. But he's had a bit of a niggling injury, isn't he, in his knee?
Oh, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, so he was almost doubtful for this year's tour, but I think he's been put in now. But yeah, he's had a bit of a dodgy knee. So, but apparently, if he wasn't to go,
Mark Cavendish.
Yeah, Cavendish would have gone. Yeah, but I think they said yesterday that Sam Bennett is going.
Okay, well that's good because Sam Bennett, I mean, he was far and away the best sprinter last year. I mean, he pretty much won all of the sprints which were just him, in a sense, against the sprinters. Sometimes you found a breakaway winner stealing those sort of ones which you've assumed were going to be earmarked by him to win, in a sense. But with an injury, I guess that does skew it a touch, because that sort of opens the doors to quite a few other sprinters. Guys like Caleb Ewan, he was
Yeah.
relatively close to it getting to the front, and he is about 5 years younger than both Bennett and Sagan. Do you think this could be the year for some? Well, no, you've already said Sagan is your favourite for
Yeah,
it.
I have, yeah.
In terms of the pure sprint, in a sense, I don't really earmark Sagan to win those all the time. Do you not think that perhaps if it isn't Sam Bennett, do you think it could be a younger guy like Caleb Ewan, for instance? Or
Yeah,
do you
I think
it
we.
is...
I think we are still waiting to see the best of Caleb Ewan. We've seen him win so many stages at a sprint finish, but I think we are still yet to see him dominate. I think he will. His time will come where he'll have, he'll have a period of going through, 3 or 4 years of having that jersey. I think, but as long as Sagan's at the top of his game tactically as well, from his team getting him into those positions for those points. Caleb Ewan is a ridiculous sprinter. He's like 90% quads, isn't he? Like his body composition. So, I mean, you look at him. He's a tiny guy, and his quads are just like almost as wide as he is tall. So he's an out and out sprinter. But it's just you see him struggling on the stages with his hills and things because he's got that muscle mass and stuff. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting battle. I do really like Caleb. He does just seem like a really nice guy. Whenever he gets interviewed, I do. Yeah. He's got that likability factor. But yeah, I think it is going to be a really good battle for Green this year. You've got a lot of strong contenders, whereas it would have been, don't get me wrong. Like I said, I do think Sagan is gonna edge it, but it's nice to see that it's a lot more competitive than in what it has been, sort of in the last 5-10 years.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, initially, before we started this podcast, I was thinking it was going to be Wout van Aert, but you've swayed me in a sense. I do think he is going to be man-marking an Ineos guy, and I don't think he's going to have that freedom. I'll be honest, I'm going to probably put it on Van der Poel to win it all, the green jersey. It's going to be a shock one. Either he goes for those sort of ones and tries to outdo Sagan in a sense. That's the only other way I can see him getting it, really, because I don't think he's quite got that natural sprinter's ability, but he is just a beast when it comes to cycling on his own. So yeah.
But it's just whether he's got the longevity, isn't it? Really, Van der Poel. That's the issue with him. He's yet to prove himself over that sort of distance. Distance of a stage race. So I think if he can do it, fair play to him. But I think that's going to be the main factor for him. And sort of like that's why he's sort of like the unknown underdog for the green jersey, I think.
Oh, that's fair play. Good discussion on the sort of green jersey debate in a sense. Should we move on to some sort of the stages that we're sort of looking at in a sense?
Yeah.
There's some stages have got sort of time bonuses on them, but prior to that, every stage has the time bonus added to them if you win it, or second or third. But some stages have it throughout the actual stage itself, almost like an incentive for perhaps a GC rider to go off a little bit earlier or be a bit more aggressive. Do you think those time bonuses are going to pay their dividends this year? Do you think they're going to see a lot of attacking from the GC guys? In that sense?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, all the stages they come with different value, don't they? The bonuses. So I think they will be important because of how close it was last year. I think they realise how important those small seconds are. But I think you'll see the team set up so they'll be so regimented on those days where the time bonuses are. If there's a breakaway and the breakaway get the time bonuses, then who cares? Sort of in that sense. As long as it's not one of the GC contenders. But I think I do like the idea of the time bonuses. It does sort of add that sort of extra carrot to dangle for the riders. But I think there'll be exciting stages.
Cool. We've sort of earmarked some of the days we're probably going to see a bit more action from the general classification guys. Mm-hmm. First off, stage 9. You highlighted this one, for instance, and it's one of just the 3 mountaintop finishes this year. What about this stage you think is going to be pivotal in a sense?
I mean, you just got to look at the last climb, really. It's just disgusting. I mean, it's where they... I look at that and I almost like feel the ache in my legs just by looking at the graph. Like, it's just... I think what's it called? The Monte Teens, is it? Teens, I think it's called. And... this is the one where they had a landslide and they couldn't get to there in 2019. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure it's this climb.
Won the tour off of it.
Yes, so I think it's the climb they didn't get to. When sort of G was cruising down the descent, sort of getting ready to go up this climb, and then they called it off. I could be wrong, but I think that's this climb. But it's massive. The average gradient is sort of like just under 6% for 21 kilometers. So the fact that, it's unrelenting, and obviously that doesn't sound that bad, but when you think how long 20 kilometers is, and I think the average gradient,
especially as in there's a middle chunk of it where the gradient is actually 0%. So if you're thinking it's just under 6% for the entire thing, and some of it is at 0, that means for some elements, I mean, you can see on this graph, we're going up almost to 11% gradient. That's rank.
Yeah, and then there's a section in the middle which is also a kilometer, which averages at 10.7%, and I think that honestly is just a whole kilometer doing 10% is just disgusting, and not fun at all. I mean, I love how the graph goes. Red, it goes blue, some bits are red, some bits are blue. The green bits are easy, and then the awful bit is just a black bit of road, which just looks just horrible. Like, and then the last 3K. You got 7.3, 7.2, 7.6. It's going to be a tasty battle, especially the fact that it's before the first rest day as well. So you're going to get people just emptying the tank in that sense. It's going to be a great stage. I'm looking forward to that one.
That's probably going to be the first time you properly see some gaps emerge.
For sure.
Yeah. Sort of going on to stage 11, which is sort of a day after, 2 days after the rest day. That's the first time they go up, it's the only time they go up Mont Ventoux, a classic ride for the Tour de France. They don't go up every year, but it's probably one of the more featured rides. But it's a 200-kilometre stage, almost one kilometre short.
Disgusting.
The first time they go up Mont Ventoux, it's not nice. It's a 5% gradient total, 24.3 kilometre climb. But the bulk of that is under the 5% mark, and then right at the end it ramps up, and as we were talking about the black earlier, it properly hard. But then the second time they go up, it's a much shorter, it's only 15.7, but the average is 8.8%, and no kidding, if you can see the graph for that, it's almost entirely black.
And the only respite is red.
Yeah, what? There's no mercies on that, and I feel like that stage it's not going to be a stage for attacking. It's just going to be sort of a battle against the attrition in a sense, and just making sure that you don't fall back. It's not going to be about the attacks. Just don't fall off, because once you're off, there's no getting back onto that sort of lead group. It's going to be a punishing day for some of those riders. So I am looking forward to Mont Ventoux. Little known fact, I forget her name, but she went to our secondary school, the cyclist, I always forget her name.
Nicole Cook.
Nicole Cook, she did particularly well when she was on the women's, or it might be in the women's version of the Tour de France, or it was some race, but they went up Mont Ventoux, and that was where she stamped her name on the cycling world. So I read in a magazine once.
Oh, nice. Yeah, it's one of those climbs that I would love to do one day, but it's just disgusting. I mean, when you see them do it and you see the average speeds they do it at, it's just like, how are you cycling uphill?
How are you falling over? Yeah, I think they're going to fall over.
I think you will see a lot of gaps.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It is going to be a gap forming race. That it's no attacks are going to be present. Stage 15, almost 200 kilometers again, but that stage, it's got less brutal climbs in a sense. It's still hard, 5.7, 4.7, 5.9, and an 8.5. But the issue is there's 4 of them on the one stage, which is, I mean, that's gross. That's just a long day in the saddle. There's no build up to it and then the climb. So that's certainly going to be a stage where we're going to see a lot of people suffer. The only hindrance to that stage is the fact that the end is all downhill, so it is going to be, as much as you can make your distance a gap in a sense on the climbs, you've really got to be a good descender on that day, I feel, in terms of getting any sort of time advantage on the other guys. But there is, crucially, bonus points available for the final climb, so even if you don't perhaps do well on the descents, you've at least got some time out of the other guys by virtue of their bonus points.
I'd earmark someone. I would put money on the fact that Alaphilippe is looking at the stage like this. There's a lot of climbing, but the fact the amount of descending there is, and he is like probably the best descender within the peloton. I think he'd be looking at a stage like this to attack on. But the teams aren't going to let him get away in the breakaway, are they? Because of who he is and the nature of his riding. But it's gonna be a good stage again. Yeah, I'm really excited. Having a look at all the stages. A lot of them look very exciting. Sometimes you look at the route, and it just looks a bit bland. But I think they've done really well with the route this year. It looks like there's going to be a lot of standout days.
Another interesting thing about stage 15 is that it's just before rest day, as you were saying before. So yeah, another opportunity to empty the tank, knowing that you've got that sweet thought of rest on the day after. But 100% agree on that sort of Alaphilippe element. I mean, that was kind of where he was making time up on Team Sky. I think it was Team Sky when it was back when G won it. But yeah, he was absolutely rapid on those descents, and who knows, he might have even caught up to Bernal had they not cancelled the stage at that point because of the landslide. Stage 18 is the last opportunity for the general classification guys to really put some time into anybody, because it is the last mountain stage of the race. It's probably not the most brutal in a sense. It is still hard. 2 climbs on that day. One is a 17.1 kilometre, 7.3%, and the second a 13.3 kilometre, 7.4% climb. But it is last chance saloon, so I wouldn't be surprised to see that day if somebody's got a little plan up their sleeve to go, we're going to have to attack this. Almost like when Froome won the Giro with that massive assault on one in particular stage and ended up taking almost 5 minutes out of everybody else. So hopefully that could occur on stage 18.
Yeah, I mean it's the Tourmalet, isn't it? And there's always drama on the Tourmalet in the Tour de France, and I think you'll either see whoever's winning the race cement their sort of position, or you'll see a surprise attack. I think again it depends on the GC position at the time. It's so late on, you're going to see a lot of people just go for that stage who are out of contention just to sort of make their mark on that tour. But I think that's going to be a pretty nervy stage for the GC teams, because 2 really tough climbs. I mean, you've got to remember, you've got 3 weeks of racing in your legs at this point as well. Like, I think that's what people forget. They look at the graphs and think, this was easier than the stage that was last week. But yes, you've got another 1,000 kilometers in your legs since the last time you did a mountain stage or whatever. So I think the fatigue is going to be a massive element here. But yeah, you'll see a good finish, I think, on Luzardi then.
Hopefully so. The sort of final stage of Wehrmacht is stage 20, the penultimate one. The only reason I flag it is because it's a time trial. Last year, as you were saying before, we saw an absolutely epic penultimate stage where Pogačar managed to not just blow apart something like a 45-second deficit he had going into the race on Roglic, but actually ended up beating him by almost 45 seconds. So it was a really good stage for him, and it does produce a lot of drama in a sense for the Tour. But obviously this year it's a flat time trial rather than a mountainous one. Do you think that could perhaps lend its way to probably a more time trial specialist like Roglic to win the stage, and maybe perhaps even hold on to a lead, rather than, as last year was, a sort of mountainous or mountaintop stage for the time trial? Do you think that sort of could be a different factor that comes in and it's not going to be the same as last year?
Yeah, I mean, like you say, last year was just ridiculous. I mean, the fact that Pogačar did that ride without a power meter on his bike and without having any sort of data, and he just rode that off how he was feeling, that was sort of fueled by, the desire for the yellow jersey. And we saw what happens. That bike change was mental on the final climb. Probably one of the best stages I've seen in a long time, really. But yeah, I like the fact that they're finishing with a time trial again. I mean, you got someone like Geraint Thomas as a specialist. I think you got Richie Porte. He's very strong on the time trials. I think if Geraint Thomas is, if in my dream situation, if he's leading going into that last stage, I think he'll have enough to hold on, especially this flat. Brailsford has said, this tour is made for G. I mean, that tells us that that Geraint Thomas probably is their main hope, or that's what they want people to think at least. But I think it's going to be a really interesting time trial. It's going to be flat out, literally with it being flat, but it's going to be the power and the speeds are going to be crazy on that last day.
We can only hope so. Well, that sort of wraps up our podcast on this one. We've earmarked who we think's going to win. I think we're both pretty conclusive on it's probably going to be Pogacar.
Yeah, was that your actual prediction for yellow?
That was my prediction.
Yeah,
Pogacar.
okay.
Yeah, I've written it in the notes. I got it in the notes there.
So I think my heart says G. Like that's all I'm going to be wanting. But unfortunately, I think my head does say Pogacar. But I just feel like if he's on it, then best of luck to the other teams, really. But yeah, it's gonna be an exciting race for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you for joining me, and thank you for listening. All those who are listening, that is. I hope you enjoy the tour as much as we are looking forward to it. And yeah, thanks, Win, for joining us. And yeah, see you next time.
Thanks very much.